Hey fellas, me Trapper here. We're in the woods in northwestern Tennessee today, and I'm going to talk about three of my favorite blades. Now, as a trapper and a hunter, I like a narrow bladed knife rather than a big, thick battle blade, hammer through concrete block type of knives. If that's your gig, that's fine, but it's not for me. I'm going to compare and contrast three very similar sized and very similar shaped blades, and that is the Nessy, the Fire and Bone, and the BlackHat Bushcraft. Now, these knives may look similar and they may be similar in size, but I think once you get into the design and the use, they excel at very different tasks, and I'm going to compare and contrast them, and hopefully this will be of value to people trying to figure out which one they want or which ones they want. So let's take a look and I'll give you my thoughts. Okay, the Nessy is a nice lightweight little knife, and it's got a full-size handle, which is what I like. It does have finger grooves, and most of the time I'm not a finger groove kind of guy, but I have to admit on the Nessy, these finger grooves fit my fingers very well. So it's a very nice, very comfortable handle, fills the hand, and I really like that. Now, if you'll notice a couple of things. Number one, this has got the Nessmuck hump on the top of the blade, and that has come in very handy when making opening cuts on whitetails and small game. I skin a lot of beavers. You can check out some of my other videos on skinning beavers with this knife, and you can see just how that hump works. It pushes the intestines down, and then the fur rides right up over that continuous curved cut blade there. Another thing that you'll notice about this blade is that it's got a nice little choil right here. Now, normally I'm not big on those, but when I go to make an opening cut, or when I'm cutting with the blade facing up, you'll notice how my thumb fits right there. And that gives me a good index right there and make that cut up. So this really, right here, this comes in handy when you're making those opening cuts or using that blade on the upside. So that's really nice right there. Now, the final thing to take a look at, I want you to look at the tip and notice that distal taper on that tip. Notice how it thins out. This knife has a very thin tip. There you go. You can probably see that a little bit better. And that gives you excellent control. You'll notice how I can put my finger right there on that choil, get up on that hump, and then I am right there having very precise control over that very fine tip. This is great for caping, cutting around noses, eyes, ears, lips, paws, and all that stuff that a taxidermist or a trapper like myself does. And so I really like that distal taper when it comes to fine skinning and caping chores. So, a couple of things on this knife. Number one, it's got that continuous cut. You know, there's no woodsman grind or cutout grind there. It goes from the Scandi down to the saber. It's got the Nessmuck hump. It's got a distal taper. So for me, this is a great skinning knife. This is also a great food prep knife. So, what is my use for the little Nessy here? Number one, it's very lightweight, so it's a good little EDC knife just around town when I'm not going to be doing, anything heavy, just opening boxes, cutting cord, rope, straps, different things like that. Works great for that. Great food prep knife when you're out, camping, and you're going to be working with food, or your home, have this in your house. But my primary use for this blade is in the skinning shed, and this is a very handy skinning knife. I really like it. Now, next up is the Fire and Bone. You'll notice it's roughly the same size. It's a little bit bigger than the Nessy. It's basically the same width, but this is a radically different knife here. The first thing you'll notice is that it's got the cutout grind, the woodsman's grind, I believe is what Mr. Collins calls it. It's got the tooth right there, which is like a single point serration, very aggressive cutting implement right there. Once again, you can look at some of my other videos where I'm skinning and I demonstrate the use of that tooth, and I show how I use this little curved grind to wring legs. But this knife also has a nice belly on it which makes it a good skinner. Now, when it comes to the handle, you'll notice there's no finger grooves on this handle. This handle fills the hand. You can see right there, it's a good size handle, not too thick, not too thin, and no finger grooves on it, so it's easy to grip. Now, the next thing you'll notice how this point on this blade, this doesn't come to nearly as fine a tip as the Nessy does. In other words, this has got a thicker, stronger point, and so that makes this blade much more safe for any kind of drilling holes, you know, putting something in a fireboard or something like that. So you're not going to hurt that tip. So for me, what is my use for this knife? And of course, this is a prototype. It's in 01. Most of them are in AEBL, and this is prototype B, the second one made here. This is an excellent knife if I were going to deer camp, if I were going on a backcountry hunt, or a camping trip where I was going to be carrying one knife for hunting and camping. With this Scandi grind, you can do woodwork. With the belly on it, you can do skinning. It's got good blade thickness, good tip thickness, and it's not a super big knife. So if you're going to be doing a lot of hiking, going long distances, this tucks away and you really don't know that you have it on your hip. So this to me is a good all-around blade. It's not a heavy-duty skinner, it's not a heavy-duty bushcraft knife, but it's something that will get the job done. And so this to me is sort of what I would call best all around. All right, now let's take a look at the BlackHat Bushcraft blade. Now this knife is the largest of the three right here. The handle is very similar to the Nessy handle, but it's a little bit bigger. It's got the finger grooves on it, but once again, I have to admit, even though I'm not a finger groove guy, you can see that fits my hand. I wanted to complain about the handle, but honestly, I can't. Now this knife is what I consider to be a dedicated woodworking knife, dedicated bushcraft knife, or a heavy-duty camp knife. Okay, so let's take a look. Number one, you can see this has got a very robust point on it. You don't have to worry about breaking that point if you're doing any drilling for a fireboard or anything like that. Now, what really surprised me about this knife, and if you haven't watched Matt Mercer's review of this knife on his channel, BlackHat Bushcraft, you really need to go watch it. It's about a 20-minute video, and he does a much better job of explaining the design and the theory behind it than I do, and there's no reason for me to repeat his work. So what I'm going to do is just share my thoughts on it after using it for a while. You can see you've got a very substantial Scandi grind right here. You've got a lot of room to work on that, and you'll notice this isn't the cutout or the curved grind. This is a straight Scandi grind right here. Then it goes into the saber grind towards the end. What really shocked me was this knife cuts like a much larger knife. It's almost like a small sword, and it's because this continuous curved edge right here. You know, if you walk up to a sapling, I'm chopping saplings as thick as my thumb with one swing of this knife. Just give it a swing, and it just cuts. And this Scandi grind right here, it really bites in deep, and then as you continue to cut like that, it just slices right through it. This knife is just amazing for any type of whittling, bushcraft, woodwork, or anything like that. So what do I use this knife for? Two of the most common tasks that I do is either number one, whittling trap stakes or snaring supports. I'll go out, I'll get a piece of wood off a beaver dam, and I will whittle a point on it and whittle the top, and then I'll split the top. This knife does an outstanding job of that kind of thing. The other thing is I often will whittle tent stakes or stakes for my tarp when I'm camping. Once again, this does a great job. You know, I carry the little aluminum stakes with me. What do they call them? MSR groundhog stakes. But a lot of times you get in loose mud or soft ground, and you need to cut the steaks, this thing just makes incredibly light work of it. Another thing, when it comes to batoning, the first two knives I would not baton with. The Nessy is way too thin at the tip. I would not be pounding on the tip of the Nessy. The Fire and Bone, you could do it in an emergency, but it's a little bit lacking in blade length to be a batoning knife. That's where the additional length and the additional strength of this blade comes in handy. I would have no problem doing some small or light batoning with this knife. And when it comes to the subject of batoning, to me, it's an emergency thing. If I'm not mistaken, Morris Kohansky popularized that technique, and he did it while he was instructing Canadian military personnel, Canadian pilots, on survival techniques. So if they got shot down or lost or stranded in the woods and all they had was their service knife, they could still get into some firewood. So batoning is not something that I do on a regular basis. It's not something that I count on, but if I had to do it, this knife would handle it like a champ, and I would have no worries whatsoever. And the funny thing is out of those three knives, this is rapidly becoming the one that I reach for on an everyday basis. There's just something about this knife. It's not too little, it's not too big, it fills the hand, it cuts like a much bigger knife, it's robust enough to take some punishment, and this is just a great, what I would call general purpose camp knife. I don't have any problem doing food prep with it, cutting onions, cutting tomatoes, or anything like that. I would not choose this as my primary skinning blade in the fur shed, but if I downed a deer or something like that, and this is the blade that I have no problem cutting it up, quartering it up, or anything like that. You can get up there and get some fine control on it. And I just, honestly, when I purchased this blade, I thought it was going to be basically a bushcraft knife. And honestly, it's turned out to be a lot more than that. It's turned out to be my go-to general purpose woods knife. So when I go into the woods, if I'm not on a dedicated hunting trip, if I'm not in the skinning shed, if I'm not in the kitchen, more than likely, this is the one that I'm going to pick up. I am very, very impressed with this knife. The design is superb, and like I say, a lot of it is subtle. When you look at it, there's nothing that really jumps out at you, but it's not until you start using this knife and handling this knife and putting it through its paces that it really shines, and you really appreciate the subtleness. So anyway, Matt, you did a great job on this, and of course Mr. Collins did a great job executing and producing it. Beautiful knife, and of course it comes with a stitch gear sheath. And what can you say about stitch gear except these are lifetime sheaths, especially at my age. I can promise you this sheath is gonna outlast me, most likely. So anyway, that's a look at 3 of the narrow-bladed WC knives that I own. They are all superb knives. Quality of construction, fit and finish, and the design of the knives are all superb. It just really comes down to your personal preference and what your intended uses are. So which one is best for you? Well, that's up to you. And in my case, I had to have all 3 because I'm going to grab the right knife for the job. I hope this was useful. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see y'all next time.